Fatal Frame is a series that delves into the religious traditions of Japan and their darkest sides. But how much of it is based on real traditions and beliefs? And how much is fiction? Is Japanese tradition really so dark as to require human sacrifice and countless deaths? And what do those deaths really contribute in the context of religious belief? To understand the real-world roots of Fatal Frame's rituals, we have to examine the three traditions that most influence it: Shinto, an indigenous Japanese religious belief; Buddhism, an imported tradition that has taken on its own Japanese flavor; and Onmyodo, a tradition of myth and magic with roots in Chinese Taoism. Only then can we piece together what Fatal Frame does with those threads of influence, and how it twists them to dark ends. Shinto is a faith based in the belief in the kami, of spirits that exist throughout the world, as major and minor gods and demons, as the embodiments of the mountains and rivers, as sources of energy that can be pure or malicious. These spirits are all around us and can influence our lives and our environment. Disasters and disease have often been laid at the kami's feet, as have blessings and benefits. Thousands of years ago, this tradition centered upon placating kami spirits, keeping them happy and peaceful so they would bless the inhabitants of the land. This involved ritual dance, offerings of food, the caretaking of shrines dedicated to the kami, and protecting the land that was considered sacred to them. Shinto is primarily concerned with the concepts of harare and kegare, purity and impurity. The concepts are somewhat difficult to truly translate since they aren't literally about what is dirty and what is clean. Kegare is a state of being in which something, someone, or somewhere has been made impure due to an action, choice, event, or simply by the course of time. It does not necessarily mean the action is evil or wrong. It is simply impure. The shedding of blood is one such impurity, as is any kind of physical or mental illness. The term Shinto is originally from the Chinese word Shendao, and was a Taoist term used to refer to the rules of nature. The term was imported and became associated with Japanese traditions, and it had a similar meaning. Shinto is the way of the kami, how to live in accordance with the laws of the gods, which are the laws of nature, because the two are one and the same. Thus, harare and kegare, purity and impurity, occur based on whether or not you are living with the gods, or if you have broken their rules. Kegare is caused by sumi, by the transgression of natural or social laws. Again, this isn't necessarily outright evil, it is simply cause and effect. Humans carry impurities with them. Our thoughts, our jealousies, angers, griefs, can all leave trails and traces of impurities in the places we go and visit. Once a year, the Japanese people participate in the Oha-rae, the great purity ritual close to the new year that cleanses all the gathered impurities built up over that year. This is one of the most important Shinto rituals, and many more people travel to shrines at this time of year than any other in Japan. You can consider it like daily life. Simply by living, you collect dirt and dust on your body, and eventually need a bath to cleanse it off. In fact, bathing is a big part of Shinto. Water is used to cleanse and purify. Before praying at shrines, people will clean their mouths and hands as part of the ritual. There are many important symbols and concepts to Shinto. Fans of Japanese media will likely recognize the torii, the tall wooden gates seen in many Japanese locales. These were originally used as general gateways, but over time became restricted to especially holy areas. They are indications that the person is passing from the ordinary world into the otherworldly. to the realm of the gods. It marks off the land which belongs to the kami and stands at the entrance to many shrines, great and small. Another common symbol is the shimenawa, or the sacred rope that marks off land sacred to the kami. You may see zigzag-shaped pieces of paper hanging from them called shide. Like the tori, they are indicators of holiness, and may often be seen tied around trees or rocks that are home to kami spirits. They are also seen throughout many shrines, sometimes in enormous size. Three of the most important Shinto symbols are the imperial regalia, three mythical items said to have been bestowed upon the emperor's ancestor. These objects, given by the goddess Amaterasu, include a sword, a set of beads called magatama, and most importantly, a sacred mirror. It is the mirror which has become one of Shinto's most common and important symbols. It is often used to house the body of the kami, tucked away in the inner cabinets of a Shinto shrine, or a mirror may be placed upon the shrine's shelf as an object of worship, a representation of purity. In stories, the mirror's ability to reflect the human face often gives it a primordial power, a connection to souls and the spirits, which can connect the living and the dead. The pure, clean surface of the mirror, which reflects the world as it is believed to represent a great many things in Shinto belief, a complex combination of religious thought and feeling that embodies all that the kami and our relationship with them are meant to be: pure, clean, and bright. The colors of Shinto are primarily red, white, and black. Torii gates are often painted red. Miko wear white tops and red bottoms, and in ancient times, the male priests also wore red. White is sacred, pure, the color of the gods. It is the color most associated with Shinto ritual. Black is the masculine color, the color of the traditional hats worn by scholars and priests. Red is celebratory, used in festivals and as decorations on statues. There aren't truly any great creator gods of Shinto, though the myths do name primordial gods who play little role in the myths or the daily lives of people. The most ancient Shinto texts, the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, present certain gods as the most important, as part of the imperial court's attempt to centralize and legitimize their control of the country at that time. In ancient times, kami originated as the local ancestral gods of certain families and clans, or of certain regions. As one family became the strongest and most politically powerful, it was their family gods who were centered in the mythology, and named Japan's greatest. The highest of those is Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, said to be the primordial ancestor of the imperial family. What is death in the world of Shinto? You might think it is an impurity, and you would be right in that death causes impurities to the people associated with the dead and the place the person has died. But the death itself is not an impurity exactly. It is seen more like a curse. The dead are not gone from this world. They continue to exist as reikon, spirits who visit the world of the living and can bestow blessings upon their descendants. The living leave offerings to the dead. While the Japanese do practice ancestor worship, for the most part their focus tends to be on very close immediate relatives, the recently dead. Leaving offerings for the dead, especially in the first 45 days in which the soul is in a state of limbo, is very important. Should the living fail to perform the proper rites, the dead may never pass on, and may linger as preta, hungry ghosts. Unlike many other religious traditions, Shinto does not handle the dead or funeral rites in the modern era. It is not because it is impure, though dead bodies are considered to spread impurities. But the function of a Shinto priest is different. A Shinto shrine is home to a kami, a god. Inside the temple is the god's body, a physical object that acts as their connection to this world, their embodiment. The shrine is meant to be their home, and the priests their servants. A Shinto priest would not perform a funeral because it is not part of their responsibilities to the kami. death has little to do with these gods. So what is the role of a Shinto priest? The priest performs various rituals, gives offerings and prayers, in order to please the kami and protect the community. These are typically seasonal, associated with certain times of year, and focus on cleansing impurity and pleasing the gods. These roles aren't necessarily the priests only. In Shinto, laymen can also be performers of rituals. In ancient times, it was the clan family head who would lead the rituals in honor of the kami, and everyone in the clan was expected to be involved in these rituals. It was an honor and a responsibility, as a member of the clan and a descendant of the kami being honored, to be part of the rituals required to please the gods. The outfits worn during these rituals are taken from the noble clothing worn in the Heian period. White socks, called tabi, are worn indoors, and black lacquered shoes, called shosei, are worn outside. The kimono is typically white, and may include an outer layer called a kariginu. Black headgear, called iboshi, with the hair pulled up on the head, complete the outfit. Though in cases in which a priest performs the role, they would also have a shaku, a wooden slab indicating their office. In the early 600s, which is the beginning of the written record of Japanese history, Korean immigrants brought with them to Japan a religion the country had not seen before. It was Buddhism, which had traveled there from India through China and finally the Korean peninsula. It was not an immediate success, but over time Buddhism proved to be particularly adaptable to the existing traditions on the islands, or else the Japanese people were simply very good at blending together new ideas with the old. It is often said that Shinto lacked a moral religious center, which Buddhism provided. Personally, I think that's a major simplification, but at the very least, Buddhism did provide written treatises on religious and moral thought that Shinto had yet to provide, and may have in the coming centuries had it continued to evolve on its own. Instead, Buddhism and Shinto began to blur and meld together, until a period in the 13th century when, for some time, the two religions were practically one. Many centuries later, the government would forcibly separate them, but even today, the two traditions share many gods, rituals, imagery, and beliefs. Buddhism stems from the teaching of the Buddha, belief in the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, in nirvana and samsara. In Japan, this tradition evolved considerably in new directions, and today there are at least 13 different denominations of Buddhism, some of which are original to Japan, others variations on mainland traditions. Buddhism believes this world is impermanent and imperfect. Yet in spite of this, we as people live as if the world will last forever, as if life should be perfect. We cause suffering for ourselves and others through our actions because we act in ignorance. The path to a better life, the Eightfold Path, involves acting in a moral, self-aware way in order to minimize the suffering of yourself and others. In Japan, Buddhism changed quite a bit. Over time, the rules that kept priests separate from the laymen relaxed greatly. In some schools, priests could marry, have children, have sex, could drink, and even eat meat. Other traditions, such as Zen, would step away from the written word entirely, arguing that focusing on the written word over personal experience could be a distraction itself. Buddhism almost entirely transformed, broken down to base parts and rebuilt in the Japanese image. And alongside it, Shinto ideas and gods were adapted into Buddhism, and vice versa. What Buddhism truly provided the Japanese with was a cosmology, a belief in reincarnation and the cycles of life, which was not present in Shinto before. The afterlife in Shinto was yomi, an underground place associated with caves and the earth, but given little detail. When you died, that was the end, and the dead all went to the same place, a place of impurity and decay, in which they muddled about in dismal darkness forever. The strand of Buddhism which traveled to Japan imagined a far more detailed, involved afterlife, types of spirits and lives based on karma of the living and dying. There are thousands of heavens and hells, gods and demons, and many rituals and prayers involving them. The rich tapestry of language and imagery gave the Japanese more to call upon in their visions of the afterlife, and added a great deal to their art and literature. Much of early Japanese thought and tradition was influenced by China. The country was incredibly powerful during the era Japan as a nation was solidified. It would weaken for a time in the coming centuries, but at that time, it was the model of civilization Japan mirrored itself upon. The country took on the same political framework, the same structure of its cities, even mirrored styles of art and writing, which would all eventually take on their own unique Japanese style. One of these imports was Taoism, a philosophical school of thought which, in China, evolved into a complex folk religion and magical tradition as old as Buddhism. The term for Shinto was a Taoist term, and more than giving the Japanese a name for their own traditions, Taoism would heavily influence those traditions with its symbols, its magics, and its beliefs. Taoism centers on belief in the Tao, or the way of nature. There is a flow and natural cycle to everything. Summer turns to fall, morning to night, and we as people are also part of this natural cycle and flow. Rather than fight it, we should move with it, remain at peace with nature in order to live our best lives. Better to be like water, which can flow and move through any obstacle, than to be stiff and unchanging as rock. It is both a philosophy on one hand and a folk tradition on the other, and the two mix and intertwine. As a philosophy, Taoism has many written texts that have been heavily analyzed by scholars as works on the nature of man and the world. On the other, traditional Chinese divination and medicine became part of Taoism, and much like Western alchemy, the tradition took on a mystic flavor, centered on healing, longevity, and spell casting. In Japan, there was already a long tradition of divination and folk magic. The traditions of Taoism were easily adopted into these already existing ones, and alongside Shinto beliefs, transformed into a new tradition, Onmyodo, a uniquely Japanese system of belief. A form of divination and spellcasting which pulls on Shinto, Buddhist, Taoist, and even Vedic traditions. In the ancient days, the practitioners of Onmyodo, the Onmyoji, were important figures at the imperial court. There was an official court of divination, and those who practiced the art served to decide the best days for certain rituals, when people should travel or not, whether there would be good fortune or bad. They were also meant to protect the nation, cast spells and dispel spirits, to exorcise and purify. Today, they are popular figures in fiction, since the tradition was brought back into favor by Yume Makara Baku's book series, Onmyoji, and the films based on them. Onmyodo takes on many Chinese Taoist beliefs. The number 5 is sacred. There are 5 sacred mountains in China. There are 5 elements, 5 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, and center. This focus on the number 5 also makes the 5-pointed star, or pentagram, a holy magic symbol, and one used in many magical spells. Spells in Onmyodo focus on the use of talismans, which are written spells created by the practitioner on long strips of white paper using black and red ink. The writing on these papers can be a blend of Japanese, Chinese, and even Siddham, a Hindu-Buddhist language, and the text itself is often exaggerated, stylized, and heavily detailed. The art of it, the spontaneity, is part of the spell. Taoism believes in the importance of living in the moment, of spontaneous movement and thought, as part of the ever-changing, moving world. It is from Onmyodo that Japan inherited its belief in good and bad luck days, times, and even years. In Taoism, the world is divided into yin and yang, called in and yo in Japanese. And these are the positive and negative forces of the world. They are not good and evil necessarily, merely opposing forces. Things come and go. They move up and down. Everything has its opposite, and so the entire cosmos is divided into those opposites under the umbrella of yin and yang. For people, this means that some days and times have a negative energy to them, which is bad luck for the living, and best to be avoided. In Japan, this tradition, going by the lunar calendar, marks the first day of the month as unlucky, the fourth day at night, the eighth day at daytime, and so on. Certain times of day are also seen as unlucky, as are certain years of your life. In the same vein, numbers themselves have positive and negative force. In Chinese belief, odd numbers are yang, even numbers are yin, and the Japanese have inherited this preference for odd numbers. What makes the yin and yang possibly dangerous is the association of yin with the energy of the dead. This means that anything considered yin, which includes the moon and the feminine, are considered closer to the spirit world, closer to death. That is why the moon is often associated with the afterlife, and why women are believed to be more spiritually attuned to the supernatural. All the pieces of Fatal Frame's rituals come from these living traditions. But there is a fourth topic to discuss before we dive deeper into Fatal Frame itself: the tradition of human sacrifice in Japan. Go back far enough in most cultures, you'll likely find some variety of this tradition, whether it be a religious ritual, forced labor, or state-sponsored execution. In Japan, the idea of sacrificing human beings, like many other ideas, seems to have been imported from China. Japan's belief in the sanctity of nature meant trouble for any growing civilization. Construction meant destroying the natural world, going against the will of the gods and desecrating their land. An island nation troubled by terrible storms, earthquakes, and natural disasters, it was often believed such events were due to the kami's disapproval, and something had to be done to placate them. For construction sites, a human sacrifice could please the gods so they would bless the construction, even as it diverted rivers or changed the landscapes. These deaths, people who were buried alive in a building or a bridge to please the gods, were called Hitobashira, human pillar, and there are many stories and legends associated with the concept throughout Japan. A legend contained in the Nihon Shoki, an ancient Shinto text from the early 600s, contains a story centered on sacrifice. The Emperor Nintoku, from 323 BCE, had a dream in which the gods told him to sacrifice 2 men to the river gods to stop the terrible floods that were tormenting his people. The first person chosen, Kawakubi of Musashi, was thrown into the Kitakawa River as a sacrifice. Another famous story from the Nihon Shoki depicts a similar event over the ocean, when a prince's consort chose to throw herself overboard during a storm to please the gods and save her love. These traditions are remembered and kept alive even in the modern era. A record of human sacrifices in Japan contains the story of a village commemorating the sacrifice of children, a boy and a girl, to an evil weasel in their village. The village was freed from this burden by a priest, and the village began to celebrate this event every year with a festival, even hundreds of years later. Many parts of Japan contain similar festivals and rituals that honor relics of the past, indicating that ritual sacrifice might once have been practiced there centuries ago. The stories of these events often depict the people as willing, devout sacrifices, choosing the role to either save their people or a loved one from being chosen. The human sacrifice is a scapegoat. They take on all the bad luck and ill will, the kagare of whatever action or event has occurred, in order to bring back peace and natural order. Whatever has caused the impurity is appeased by the death as a kind of payment. But most of Japanese history tends to indicate such a practice focused on the use of paper dolls, inanimate objects, rather than real people, despite the countless stories and legends that tell of them. How many of these legends are true? Most of them descend from such antiquity they're impossible to confirm. Deaths during construction were also not uncommon and were considered Hitobashira, sacrifices to placate the gods. However, a few instances of what may have been human sacrifice have been found. Possible sacrifices have been found in Hiji Castle, Edo Castle, Urasoe Castle, and others, each instance revealing a body buried in a strange location or a strange way, likely indicating a sacrifice. In Saru Kyoji village, there was a legend of a monk who willingly chose to sacrifice his life to help the village after a terrible landslide devastated the land. In 1937, the bones of a man were found in a local temple there, sitting in a meditative posture, making the story of the sacrificial monk very likely. Many of the known instances of such sacrifice relate to monks, specifically to the practice of Soku Shinbutsu, the practice of becoming a living Buddha by being entombed alive, meditating underground until death. The body would be mummified and enshrined as a living Buddha. So how do we understand the history of human sacrifice in Japan? Given what pieces remain, it seems real-world instances of the practice were likely rare, and when they occurred, religious ritual had little to do with it. A priest or a temple was not involved. Instead, it was a social contract in which societal pressure or a social superior coerced, convinced, or even murdered the sacrifice. It was an act to please the kami, but not one that involved actual Shinto ritual or priests. When ritual was involved, it was due to the sacrifice being a monk or a priest making the willing choice to entomb themselves, which involved a lengthy ritual. In Japan, ritual is incredibly important. It is at the heart of so many of their religious practices, social structures, and day-to-day lives. Ritual defines boundaries and marks out accepted behaviors, and helps to define and outline the way of the world. In Shinto, ritual reinforces the natural order. It is ritual that is designed to keep the world working as intended, to keep everything in its natural place, to keep impurity from building and disrupting life. And it is here that we may discuss Fatal Frame. The colors of Fatal Frame are muted and thematic. Much of the game is in faded tones, focusing on black, white, and small accents of red. These colors work well in a horror setting, but they are also the traditional colors of Shinto. Himuro Mansion is home to many terrible rituals. It sits upon a mouth to hell, buried deep within a cave, a reference to ancient Shinto stories of Yomi, the underworld. To keep this mouth to hell sealed, the Himuro family have developed intricate rituals performed for countless centuries. Much like real-world Shinto tradition, the traditions of the game originate in an extended family, a clan, who were considered responsible for a specific shrine's upkeep and for continuing its rituals. The family head led these rituals, but all the family, even the little children, had to play a part. Eventually, this ritual fails and a tragedy unfolds, called the Calamity, when a wave of malice is unleashed and the Himuro Mansion becomes a cursed, haunted place. In Japanese, that malice energy is called shoki, a term that refers to the dark or yin energy given off by demons and unclean spirits. It is a corrupting force that destroys the living. It is likely what drove the head of the family to madness. The rituals of the mansion all involve women, typically young girls. As women, they have more yin, more negative energy, and are closer to the supernatural and the dead. The girls chosen for these rituals are a specific age. They must all be at least 7 years, 9 months, and 25 days old, and are typically close to that age rather than older. Young children, especially in ancient times, often suffer early deaths. They are more fragile, more easily taken by disease or accident, making the early years the most dangerous for families. In Japan, this developed into a belief that children below the age of 7 are not fully in this world yet. They are still mostly spirit. And should they die, they simply fade away back into the spirit world, rather than lingering as ghosts. The ritual, involving children who are older than 7 and 9 months, would imply that it needed children who were fully in this world, living humans rather than spirits. The placing of the rituals in the later part of the year ties into other Shinto purity rituals, tied into the coming of the new year. It's likely the timing of the Fatal Frame rituals, starting in September and continuing to December 26th, are timed to coincide with the yearly purity rituals, so that the door to hell is closed and the house purified as one. The first ritual involves a blinded maiden, a woman who is forcibly made blind by the use of a grotesque mask. The woman is chosen during a demon tag game, the first child caught during the previous game. This is because the first child, unable to hide well, is believed to be the most spiritually blind, when the last child to be caught, who does hide well, is thought to be spiritually powerful, capable of becoming the sacrificial maiden. Demon tag is a real game in Japanese tradition, similar to normal tag, save the one hunting the other children is called the demon. The blinded woman who plays the demon is made blind to blind demons to her presence. It also ties into Japanese historic belief. Blindness was often associated with protection from the other world. The story of Hoichi the Earless involves a similar idea. It is the legend of a biwa hoshi, a blind musician, who inadvertently performs for a group of spirits who he does not realize are dead. His blindness protects him. Eventually, he realizes the truth and escapes the spirit with the aid of a priest. The second woman involved in the ritual is the rope shrine maiden. She is called a miko in Japanese, a Shinto term referring to a young woman who performs certain rituals at shrines. Her kimono is worn with the layers right over left, which is how kimonos are worn by the bodies of the deceased. White is also the color of death in Buddhism. Long black hair is associated with funerals and death. Traditionally, hair was kept long by men and women, tied up on the head, but after death, the long hair was allowed to fall down and hang around the body. This image of the dead, long black hair, white clothes, was popularized by kabuki theater in the last few hundred years, leading to many ghost stories based on the image. Kyrie isn't only wearing a kimono. Tied to her neck and wrists, she wears the ceremonial ropes, the shimenawa, which were used in the ritual, as well as the zigzag paper shide, both of which are associated with the kami and the other world. The use of ropes to kill the sacrifice is tied into their holy meaning. The ropes are the boundaries that tie off the spirit world, but here they are used in a terrible manner, turning a common Japanese religious symbol into something terrifying. Once the ritual has been performed, the deceased maidens are enshrined inside the moon shrine, along the tunnel that leads to the sacrificial altar. Though only one mummy is seen in-game, behind-the-scenes information reveals there was the intent to show many mummies, indicating all the girls were mummified and enshrined. In the final game, only the first maiden was present. The mummy resembles real-world Soku Shinbutsu, Buddhist mummies. It implies a connection between the two ideas, and this is furthered by the fact the rope maiden must be free of earthly attachments, a Buddhist concern. The maiden must be isolated from the world, detached from it, to not care about their life or the world around them, to solely focus on the next world. This is a Buddhist tactic, one many monks would follow by escaping civilization and living in the natural world. It means that the successful rope shrine maiden was in fact a Buddha. The rituals of Fatal Frame involve the use of many, many masks. The usage of the mask is tied into the adoption of a certain role. Taking on an identity is part of the ritual. 4 of these masks are items the player can find, known in English as the happy, sad, joyful, and angry masks. In Shinto tradition, there's a belief that the soul is made of many parts, rather than being one complete, distinct whole. These parts embody pieces of the human experience, emotions and actions that are integral to who we are. They can be separated from us in extreme times, such as during hauntings or when certain kami are enraged and lose control of themselves, becoming their angry embodiment. These 4 selves are called the mitama, and each represents a part of the soul. They are the Ara, Nigi, Saki, and Kushi mitama, and each can essentially be translated to angry, sad, happy, and joyful. The 4 masks represent the 4 souls, and are connected to the 4 priests who use them to perform the rituals. The priests themselves may be connected to the 4 classes of priests who once served the Heian imperial court. The idea of multiple souls is also the source of the split souls of Kyrie and her younger self. It is common in Japanese belief and storytelling to present souls as having multiple incarnations, as it is believed extreme circumstances or feeling can split the mitama and lead to different pieces of the soul acting on their own. The appearance of many of the masks in the game are drawn from Japanese theatrical tradition, specifically No. It's an ancient form of theater which uses masks as representations of specific characters and roles in the story. The masks are universal. Every play uses similar masks, and each type of mask represents a type of character. The audience will recognize the bad guy or the love interest because of the mask the character wears on stage. The most distinctive mask used in Fatal Frame is the one worn by the head of the Himuro family, the Mask of Reflection, which transforms to reflect the nature of the person wearing it. It becomes a demonic mask on the family head, and its appearance is identical to the Hanya mask used in No. Hanya is a mask associated with female spirits, specifically the Onryo. During plays, a female character may be driven to madness or insane jealousy, and the mask she wears is slowly transformed into the Hanya, to represent her transformation into a demonic spirit. The Hanya is worn solely by spirits of vengeance, making the head of the family an Onryo, a creature heavily associated with death and the spirit world. Other masks in the game more generally resemble certain types of No masks. The Okina, used for old men, somewhat resembles the Angry mask. The Happy mask resembles the style used to represent female characters, and Sad resembles Uba, the old woman mask. When the ritual fails and the head of the family loses his mind, he attacks the members of the Himuro family, specifically the Shinto priests. He beheads them and carries the heads with him, leading to the spirits wandering the mansion looking for them. This is tied into old beliefs about the importance of a person's head. In the samurai era, the head was used as proof of a kill, and they were collected by samurai during wars as proof of their prowess. If you couldn't get the whole head, a nose or ears was also appropriate. It was a terrible fate the victor forced upon his victim, a way of humiliating the enemy. The Himuro family head is punishing the priests for failing in their duty. These heads now belong to him. It explains why he can throw ghostly heads at the player during his boss fight. Written on the family head's clothes is what appears to be an Onmyodo talisman, likely something to protect him during the rituals. From his neck hangs Holy Shide, similar to Kyrie, indicating his own role as a holy figure during the ritual. The number 5 appears throughout Fatal Frame. There are 5 Buddhas, 5 holy mirrors, 5 ropes. While certain strands of Buddhism revere 5 special Buddhas, in this case it seems more likely to stem from Onmyodo's mystic reverence for the number 5. The 5 carvings the player must find have much to do with the practice. Their names are based on 5 colors, similar to the 5 colors associated with the 5 elements of Onmyodo. The puzzles they're used to solve have a pentagram on them, a magic symbol famous for its association with Onmyodo in Japan. The writing on the carvings and the puzzles themselves resemble Siddham, one of the many writing styles used to cast Onmyodo spells. Throughout the game, the player must unlock certain doors by taking pictures of various locations. The doors have paper on them which burns off when they are unsealed. These are ofuda, or Japanese talismans used in Shinto and Onmyodo tradition to cast spells. Another puzzle involves the player finding 5 Buddhist statues, associated with the 4 limbs and neck which are involved in the rope ritual. In some Buddhist traditions, there are 5 sacred Buddhas who represent all the parts of creation, and are associated with the colors, directions, and elements of nature. These Buddhas are headless like the priests, perhaps representing the 5 gods of the region who once protected it, yet are no longer present. The appearance of the Buddha in-game is constant throughout. The statues, large and small, depict the Buddha standing on what appears to be the symbol of the lotus, the circular back representing a halo, the left arm raised to shoulder height, palm out, the right arm down at its side. The arrangement of the arms is similar to the Abhaya Mudra, a common gesture in Buddhist art which represents fearlessness and safety. However, the gesture in-game is reversed. It's meant to be done with the right hand. The most important object in the game is the Holy Mirror, referred to in Japanese as a kami mirror. The lore of the game reveals there were 5 mirrors, one for each of the 5 gods and 5 shrines of the region. These mirrors were likely acting as the body of the kami, and were keeping the calamity from occurring. When the mirrors broke, the kami lost their connection to this world, and the mirrors lost their spiritual power. To stop the malice of the other world, the player must repair the true mirror and place it before the gate, using the power of the mirror's holy presence to repel and create a barrier between worlds. There are 2 shrines in the game: Narukami Shrine, where the 5 Buddha statues are placed, and the Moon Shrine, the secret underground location of the rope altar. The cabinet in the shrine resembles the cabinet used to keep the body of the kami in Shinto shrines. The final ritual of the game occurs within a hidden altar in the Moon Shrine, and the moon plays an important part in the ritual. The sacrifice is brought to the moon well the day before their death and sits to bathe in moonlight the whole evening at the bottom of the well. The moon is the symbol of yin, the afterlife, and the spirit world. The kami of the moon is Tsukuyomi, the brother and sometimes husband of the most prominent Shinto figure, Amaterasu. In Japanese culture, the moon is beloved. Moon viewing is a popular pastime. The game once again takes something seen positively in Japanese culture and gives it an eerie twist. Wells are symbols of the afterlife, of existence before life, of the womb. Inside the earth is already associated with the underworld. The well, with its long tunnel and access to the outside world, has long been associated with the time before life. It's also heavily associated with ghost stories, thanks to old folk tales like the story of Okiku, a young woman who is murdered and tossed down a well, only to crawl out as a ghost seeking vengeance. Other folk tales, like the story of the Violet Well, and the ghost in the mirror buried in a well, center upon wells as the connection between that world and this one. The hairpin used to unlock the Moonwell door is an item passed down from one rope maiden to the next. In past centuries, the coming-of-age ceremony for young women in Japan involved being given a hairpin, and it's likely that given the young age when the girls are isolated from the world, the hairpin to the Moon Shrine is given to them during their isolation as part of their coming of age. The central element of Fatal Frame's ritual is human sacrifice and suffering. A child isolated from the world, forced to live a life of austerity, is brutally torn apart at the young age of 17. The failure of the ritual in-game is attributed to the last sacrifice, Kyrie, and her failure to remain isolated from the world. Kyrie's failure kills countless people, and she is not set free by the end of the game. Instead, she is trapped, forced to block the gate forever. To stop the calamity and close the gate to the underworld, Kyrie chooses to become the sacrifice that blocks the gate. The ritual uses the bloodied ropes which tore the girl's body asunder to seal the gateway. While the holy mirror is meant to sit before it, two images sacred to Shinto, but one of them has been soaked in the blood of the dead, an impurity, a sacred image transformed into a weapon of death. While certain tenets of the traditions that appear in the game have been perverted towards a dark use, it is not a selfish one. These murders have not occurred to empower a sorcerer or summon a dark god. It is to keep the world safe from a terrible threat. The actions the Himuro family take are ultimately in line with what Japanese culture would expect, a family performing its duty to the gods to protect the community they live in. That heightens the sense of horror the player feels, that there is no true evil intent here. The threat is a natural one, the energy of death, and the tragedy is caused by human foibles and mistakes. However, the game does not fully condemn Kyrie for her very human need to love and be loved, to want to live. Mafuyu, Miku's brother, chooses to remain with her to give her solace. She is no longer trapped in eternal isolation, nor is she denied the love every other human is given. Fatal Frame's ending, tragic though it is, maintains a balancing act between reinforcing the general ideals of Japanese tradition, social responsibility, the community before the individual, without condemning what is natural, what makes us human, the desire for companionship and love.